Look at you, Sober Army. How you doing? This is Craig Beck, aka the Stop Drinking Expert. Welcome into another episode of the Happy Sober Podcast. And today we are talking alcohol and anxiety, alcohol and depression, alcohol and mental health. The big question for you is alcohol destroying your mental health? Now, a lot of people think the opposite. A lot of people think that their mental health would be a lot worse if they didn't have alcohol to help out. And that is part of the problem. People are stuck in this loop. They know that the alcohol is destroying their life. They know it's causing significant problems, but also they kind of believe that life would be worse without it. And so let's talk about that. Is that true? And you'll have heard this message many times before, but the answer is kind of, yeah, it is kind of true in the short term. And that's the problem with alcohol, because if you get stuck in the short term, then you get stuck in the belief that this is a benefit in your life. And that can happen not just with alcohol, that can happen with lots of things. You know, relationships. If you're in a toxic relationship, you often don't see it until you zoom out, or as they say, you take the 30,000 foot view. You see it from above as though you're in an airplane and you were watching it as though it was happening on a stage or happening to someone else. You would see it completely different. You would see the reality of what's going on. But when you're trapped in the moment, when you're trapped in the minutiae, then you sometimes can't really understand the reality of what's going on. That's why we get things like Stockholm syndrome. So you've heard of people who've been taken captive by, some psychopath. And after a certain amount of time has passed, the most illogical thing happens. The captive, starts to fall in love with the person who holds them under duress. They start to adapt to the situation. They start to concentrate on the short term. They're no longer thinking, hopefully one day I'm going to get out of this situation. They're thinking, how do I make this current moment bearable? And they learn that if they make their captor happy, they get rewarded. And this becomes a kind of positive, negative feedback loop. And they develop something called Stockholm syndrome. So they actually start to derive pleasure and feelings by making the person who has the potential to hurt them not. And the same thing is true of alcohol. And if you're still using alcohol right now and you believe there is a benefit to it, you have Stockholm syndrome around this drug. You have essentially fallen in love with a serial killer. So why does this happen and how does it pertain to mental health? So people say to me, Craig, I have really bad anxiety and the only thing that helps is having a drink. And I get it, because alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. So anxiety is really just an overactive brain that isn't being entertained, isn't being given enough to do. So you've got this very powerful machine in your head and it's bored out of its brains. So with anxiety, this part of your brain just can't sit idle. It's got too much energy. It's got too much potential. So it starts to write fictional horror stories. It starts to project the future based on events of the past. And it becomes Stephen King. It starts writing these horrible stories of terrible things that could happen. And the problem is, at some point, you stop realizing they're fiction and you start treating them as fact. So you feel immense fear, the adrenaline rushes, your heartbeat speeds up, you feel anxious, you feel on edge, and you start to propagate a cycle. Your anxious brain creates the fiction, you believe it, and the loop goes on. And then you stumble across alcohol. And you take a drink of alcohol, and it slows your brain capacity down, makes you a bit stupid. And suddenly your overpowerful brain doesn't have the processing power that it used to have, can't come up with these horrible fictions and these terrible stories that you believe, and it gives you a bit of peace. And the world slows down. And you go, oh, alcohol helped me. And it did. in the short term. But now what alcohol is going to do, because it's evil, is it's going to drop a command to fire 24 hours later to ramp up the anxiety to even more than before. Because now it's taught you that the solution to anxiety is drinking. Great. It's got you hooked now, okay, over time. So every time you feel anxious, you get your subconscious brain goes, we have a solution to this. Pour the alcohol. And so what alcohol is now going to do is every day after you drink, it's going to deliberately ramp up the sensations of jitteriness, of anxiousness that you vocalize as, I could do with a drink. And you're going to fix it with alcohol. It's now got you in a trap. You're in a loop, and it's an unbreakable loop if you stay in the short term. Because as long as you're in that short-term view, you're thinking anxiety, solution, anxiety, solution, anxiety, solution, and round and round and round and round you go. But the problem is, of course, all the time you're doing this, you're developing a tolerance for the drug. So whereas when you first started self-medicating your mental health problems with a shot of vodka, now, 10 years later, you need half a bottle of vodka. In 5 years' time, you're going to need a full bottle of vodka. And at that point, you're on the way out. Nobody's going to be drinking a bottle of vodka a day and going to survive it more than a few years. Your body just can't take it. You're going to die. All right. So this is what happens when you stay focused in the short term. All right. You've got to broaden your view of this. You've got to expand what you're looking at. And if you do that, you will see that all mental health conditions are made significantly worse by alcohol. Not slightly better, significantly worse. Okay? Depression. If you're drinking because you're depressed, you are drinking a depressant to make your depression better. That makes no sense at all. And you might say, well, Craig, hang on a minute. When I'm really depressed and I drink, it helps. And I'll say to you, yes, but that's not because it's fixing your depression. It's because you're drinking an anesthetic. You're just not aware of it as much. And the analogy I would give you for that is if you went to the doctor, okay, and the doctor said, right, unfortunately, you've got something terribly wrong with you. I can tell you what it is, or I can keep it a secret and just tell you that everything's fine and you can leave. You'll still have the problem, and it is very bad, but you just won't know what it is. And you won't have to worry about it. You won't have to take medicine or anything, because I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Which option would you choose? Would you want the doctor to tell you the truth and say, hey, look, you've got cancer, I'm afraid, unless we treat it, you're going to die? Or would you rather leave the office in ignorance and just carry on with your life? Now, obviously, the answer is the first one, isn't it? So if you're using alcohol to treat your depression, it's just the same as saying, don't tell me about the cancer. I just want to pretend I don't have it. So bye-bye, I'm just going to carry on. That's what you're doing, all right? So look, you might be thinking, well, okay, Craig, I get it, but how do I get that long-term view? Well, you got to change your programming. You got to reframe this in your subconscious mind, and that's not something you can consciously do. You can't consciously change things in your subconscious mind, because if you could, you'd be dead within about 5 seconds. Imagine if you could consciously slow down your heart. Imagine if you could consciously choose to stop breathing. There's a reason you're not allowed to access this part of the brain, because you'd mess it up royally. So in the course that I teach, this is what we do. You know, it's not an overnight fix. It's not like you download something and then, hey, presto, you're fixed. It's a reformatting of the incorrect programming that currently resides in your subconscious mind. That's why it is considered to be the world's #1 quit drinking program. And you don't need to take my word for that. You can go to Trustpilot and see thousands and thousands and thousands of people who've been through the process and are now living happy, sober lives. So look, step 1 is you go to the website, stopdrinkingexpert.com, and you get a free copy of my book, Alcohol Lied to Me, and read it and see how you feel. That's it. No commitment, not even 1 cent, no credit card required. Just go and download it and take the first step. Thanks so much. If you have questions, pop them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer. Thanks a lot. See you soon.